calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Today we have Paul Marinese with us. As a reminder, we're live and with the mics, so make sure you turn them on when you speak. Matt, do you want to introduce and...
Last time we were here, we had a conversation regarding can we utilize the existing two buildings, the current central office and the current special services, affectionately known to everybody as the greenhouse and the blue house. I'm not sure how, I think the house is still green, and I think the blue is kind of faded off into some sort of slate color by now, but that's what they referred to. And what would it take, because there is space there, and what would it take to bring it up to code, bring it up to specifications, create appropriate workspaces for everybody, make it ADA accessible, everything like that. I did meet with the building inspector this past week, and he just told me the obvious things that he just saw right away. He's not going to do a formal report because he says if you're working with an architect, they know all the ins and outs of ADA and what it should be and what you should be doing. So Paul Marinese is from Marinese Architects, right? They worked with us on the middle school back in 2004, 2003, and 2000. I think it took 3 times to pass it, but it was their design. They've worked on the kindergarten construction grant with us also. Frank is the founder, and Paul is his son. Frank is semi-retired. And Paul has, he's the owner of the business right now. And so being, what the question was, my first inclination, because they have helped us with every design that you've seen as far as central office there, that's where it comes from. They've also partnered with Ekman Construction to help on numbers and everything like that. And so now we have Paul here to kind of present his findings of what he sees we would need to do in order to make both of these offices usable space, not adding any additional space, mind you, but just to bring them up to where they should be as far as acceptable office space for adults. So with that, we can begin, or you can say a few words, or it's your meeting there, Shane.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to review what we had gone over. Internally, we sent this out yesterday. Has everybody had a chance to review this document? Before we get into the details of it, are there any, well, we should probably just summarize it real quick. Would you rather me do that, or would you like to do that? Okay. So, I'm not going to read this word for word, but we have to do a few things. We have to bring it up to code. We have to bring it up to ADA compliance. And this is intended to bring the existing space up to code and compliance. It is not adding any space. This is not the difference in square feet between this proposal and the building that we had proposed is 4,000 square feet. So, I'll just skip right to the bottom. The 4,000 square feet less. So what we're talking about is the new building that we're proposing is, let's call it 11,000 square feet. I think that's changed a little bit, 10,000, 11,000. The lower proposal that we had talked about was 8. So I guess we're comparing 2 different proposals. We had the 6.9, and then we had the lower price that was changed at the last second. So I don't think we're at a point now where we know exactly where we should go. That's the purpose of this meeting. We're going to review. We had some questions last time that said, we should vet out all existing possibilities before we look into new possibilities. So, Paul was kind enough to do that. And he went through, the exterior, replacing the side and replace the windows and doors, the trim, the ramps. We need to change the pitch of the ramps. We need to change the railings, the insulation, the sheathing, basically everything on the outside. The interior, the first line item is gut the interior. And the reason for that is there's nothing usable in those buildings. So we need to gut it down to walls. In certain circumstances, we need to add some height, some ceiling height. We need to go and have access to the basement. We need to have a new compliant AC system, the air pumps, the gas furnace, the sprinkler system, again, doors, trims, windows. So, we're building a new building essentially with the existing foundation, with the existing structure. This project cost us $4.3 million. With the foundation work that's required, it's 4.8. Just to review, the initial proposal for a new building, which was 11,000 square feet, and this building is 6,600. So based on that initial proposal, we're talking 4,400 square feet, you know, for an additional $2 million, and that's a new building. So there's a lot of cost that needs to go into the existing buildings. With that knowledge and with this detailed summary from Marinese Architects, what questions do we have initially before we get into the details with Paul?
So I have a few. So first, oh, it's on. So the first, I think it was like the second meeting that we had, where I think you had kind of asked. It is on. Is it not registering? Oh, okay. Got it. I think it was the second meeting that we had when you had asked Matt kind of point blank, like, you know, what's the goal in terms of the SAU building? There was the 11,000 square foot one, and then it got dropped to the 8,000 square foot one. And I thought you'd said right then and there, like, you know, since we already put the $4 million number out there, there's no way we're going back to the $7 million one. Did that unhappen, or?
I don't make any decisions.
Okay.
Let me clarify that. I don't make any decisions. Originally, the purpose of this was kind of to start fresh, figure out everybody's questions,
Okay.
get the public
Sure.
involved, and then make a group decision going forward.
Sure. So another question, kind of moving forward a little bit. Shane said there's nothing usable in those buildings, which, okay, but in any case, the interesting thing, so buildings like those, as Shane has pointed out last meeting and many times, they're houses, right? Like, that was the construction style.
Yeah.
And so houses, like, if we're rebuilding them, and people who live in wheelchairs, like, they live in houses. Like, there's such thing as, like, houses where people can get around with disabilities. You know, there can be, like, different kinds of lifts in there, and, you know, the right size rooms. So what confuses me right off the bat, if we're talking about there's nothing good in those buildings, so you strip it down to a whole, if that was the plan, and rebuild. Well, rebuilding a house of like those size, that's like $600,000 a piece.
Absolutely.
So if you can like strip it down to a whole and build two houses of, you know, equal space, but with the right dimensions for $600K a piece, I'm like at a loss for how we got to $4.8 million.
Agreed. If you're in that mentality, you're absolutely right. The difference is that these we can't build to houses. We have to build them as commercial properties.
And
So-
why?
Well, it's a commercial
what it
property.
Well, but,
It's not a house.
well, but here's what,
So when people from the public,
Sure.
sorry, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say by law, when we run a business that has, it, like we have New Hampshire regulations for what our schools and buildings that have our admins in schools in are accessible, so they would need to be able to access.
Just a building code, Anthony.
here's what throws me though, right? Since, you know, each of us, well, most of us were like still pooping ourselves and in diapers, right? Like from,
Recently?
well, yeah, like 40 years ago, right? Like over 40 years, those buildings that are in purpose today, the greenhouse and the blue house, that's what have been being used for the administrative buildings, right? And
Yep.
their houses.
Yep.
So you're saying like suddenly that's not
If you-
okay?
So what happens is with an existing building, as
Yep.
soon as you want to do something to it, you have to bring it up to code. In fact, even if I were to go into your house right now and I were to build something on that, if your house wasn't up to code, the panel, I would have to update all that to arc faults and ground faults and
So,
everything
like,
else. So we have to
when-
do the same thing with this. If
So
they-
when they came in and put, I know that, like, there have been modifications and changes and walls put in.
So as you
Did
know,
it
this
not apply then, but it does now?
These have not had renovations.
Well,
And
that's not true, right? Like, for example, in the current SAU building, that first room that you walk into, that could act as a security buffer if we just change the lock on the door, right? Like, that didn't exist, and people showed up one day and built the walls. So, like,
I'm sorry?
Did you see this? Oh,
yeah, last time.
okay.
Yeah,
Did you read, they spell it out right here. Research and building inspection records did not find any building permits or documents approving the change of occupancy from a single-family house to use of a business or education lease.
It was also mentioned that at the time that these started to be put into service, it was quite possible that those
It-
forms didn't even
Yeah,
exist.
they probably didn't. They may not have.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
But that's what they're saying. Like, they'd
That was
have to go back
40,
and
50
do all
years ago.
that now
Yeah, now
to
we have
change
to,
these
though.
classifications.
It's because it's considered a major renovation
Yeah.
as well. It's,
Yeah.
if it's a
pretty
modest
dangerous.
change, like putting the wall up, so you have a receptionist has a place to come to, that's different than a
Okay.
major renovation. This was major. Right out of the gate, I thought this was a bad idea. These buildings are houses, and if we don't wanna change it, then we don't change it. But they're looking for an SAU office, and I don't believe it's our decision to decide how elaborate or what have you. It's figure out what they need for spaces and accommodate those needs and move it forward. Then it's their job, the school board that is, to sell this project and get people to buy in, and that's where I see it, and I believe it from the beginning. This, we talked about fitting up Rite Aid a number of years ago, and the cost of fit up was outrageous. And so,
Well, but that's why we're here, though, because Anthony makes a good point, and a lot of residents may have the same questions. So I'm glad we're asking them, even though we know the answers. You know, it's important that we let everybody else know, because some people don't, right? I mean,
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's important that we differentiate between a residential building and a commercial building. And just right out of the gate here, elevators in a house, that's another $200,000, $400,000, right?
Yep.
Even if you're building a housing structure. So, I think it's just important to note that
And
this is
often-
commercial, has to be a commercial with
and
an elevator.
often though, they don't install elevators.
So-
There are different kind of lifts that you
So
can use.
the elevator, so a lift that you would use in your house, where you would theoretically, if you had somebody that used a wheelchair, they have, usually if they have a two-split house, they have something different upstairs because they're just being moved from like their bedroom to their off of the lift kind of thing. They're not as mobile, and they keep their big expensive wheelchair downstairs so that they can access the rest of the house. And they only have that kind of lift to be able to move themselves from those one seated to another. So if you had somebody in a wheelchair, you wouldn't be able to get a lift that would be able to bring the wheelchair
Yeah, I
all the
think-
way down the stairs.
let's not forget, this isn't our decision, it's a
No, I'm
code.
just saying
These aren't,
why.
yeah, oh, you're absolutely right. And, you know, if you do that and you got 6 people upstairs, the 5 people that can't get on that lift are gonna burn in the fire. But again, this is not a question.
gonna be
This
sprinkled.
isn't like an opinion, this is just a code. It's, we don't, there's nobody that's
You
gonna
say
argue
that,
the code.
But depending on how it is that you're approaching the renovation, it will invoke different codes.
No, it won't.
Literally any renovation that we make, because we all know it's a business, and we all know
It's a
about
town
codes,
property.
But-
and we all know that we have to do it. We can't just, you know, like the 60 years ago or 40 years ago, when it wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, brought up the right way, we can't do anything about that. We have to be able to move forward, because we have that knowledge.
Yep.
So I wouldn't feel comfortable having somebody that wouldn't be able to get up or down easily downstairs.
So, and I guess so, since we're in the middle of that part of the conversation, you know, last time, I was gonna say last week, does time fly? It's crazy.
For real.
Wow.
too quickly.
Last time, you know, when we talked and, you know, the idea was brought up like, hey, what if we found a way to like repurpose like some of that space? Well, after that meeting, you know, something I was thinking was, well, so take the current SAU building. Question, I guess. So like if the entire first floor was repurposed as potential meeting space, right? And so like that should be accessible, have a ramp,
Which you couldn't do.
some wider doors. Yeah, sure, why not?
Because you'd be renovating the building and you need to bring it up to the code, which would be the ADA, the ramp thing,
So
the door width.
It depends, like, you
But again, we have a professional here that can,
Yeah.
you know, can clarify all this for us.
so
Do you-
could you clarify, like, if you literally make a door wider, are you saying you have to like do all kinds of code work? Because when was that room put in, Pat, in the front of the SAU building?
Well, I can,
Maintenance came in and put in the wall.
Yeah, they put in walls.
there
There
was
was no
never,
permit pulled.
there was never any permits
Okay.
pulled
I can
for
put up a
any
wall in
of
this room,
that,
but it's not
any of
legal.
that.
So there was no permit pulled.
Okay.
That's just a fact. I mean, it's.
Yeah, okay.
There was no interest in anybody pulling a permit, no, was there interest in the building department in town or the fire department.
And that
It was
counter's been
just-
there for
Counter's
years
been there
and
for years and
They
years.
just added
Pat, you don't have a microphone.
that's good.
Well,
and you know, candidly, Anthony's making a great point. This is that thought process is what we've been doing for the last 40 years, which has got us to this point, and it's just you can't kick the bucket further. You know, eventually you just, but please jump in and you know.
So the way the code works is, the way the code works is if you do more than a certain value of construction on a building, whether it's a school, commercial building, whatever, then you have to bring it up to current code standards, so 2018 building codes.
When you say
And what-
value, is it the value of the
certain
property
value
or
of construction,
or it's just straight construction, so whatever?
versus
you're
building the house new. So we call it house, that old house that's there.
Yeah,
The value of that structure, I guess it's as it currently stands.
Okay.
It's whatever value the structure is, which isn't very much, because it's really old. If you do more than, 50% construction on the value of that building,
Okay.
then you have to bring it up to current code.
So is that the number, 50% of the value?
I
of
think
the
it's
building?
50%, but whatever it is, we're gonna be way over that,
Well,
because
it depends on what you do.
we can research that, but
Let's say that,
Any-
what's the house worth? You know,
Well,
in the condition
I
it's in.
can't tell you.
Let's say it's
I
worth, what do you think, Anthony? We'll use your number.
well, sure. So actually, just before I came.
200 grand?
I popped on Zillow. No, houses of that size go for like 500K. 550.
Unrenovated, 40, 50 years old. There's no way, but I'll give you 500K. It's
Well,
250 would be
The
the
elevator's
change.
it
gonna
was
cost
born
that much.
like-
The elevator is going to cost 250.
It was born pretty much the same.
Okay,
as-
well, let's give you
same as my
500K,
own
half
house.
a million bucks.
But again, so like, right, I'm trying to like explore option. I think this is something we haven't really
No
done is gone
doubt.
down the decision paths.
We love the options,
So, like-
just reasonable ones.
Yep. So like, hear me out. So if, for example, because I know that the difference, I was told that the difference, but like the $3 million difference last year between the 11,000 square foot building and the 8,000 square foot building, the $3 million difference was the size of the conference room. Was that accurate?
No.
Is that? Oh, what was the difference? What got removed?
It was around 4,000.
You can look at both drawings, we have them there.
Around
Whole
three,
different plan.
yeah, different floor
Oh,
plan.
okay. So
It just wasn't the
Sorry.
conference
I
room, it was
must have got
different
a
floor
poor summary.
plans. There was,
Okay.
yeah, you can look at both.
But I was gonna say, so if, for example, though, we were to use that first floor as meeting space in the current SAU building, and if the lower floor could be used as storage, and if storage didn't need wheelchair access, like it's a storage space, it's not like where people are going and, like people shouldn't be going down there, like with wheelchairs, it's where you keep old ballots and stuff. Like, what would it cost to do that?
More than 250,000.
But it's full of people now, so they have to go somewhere.
Yeah, where are you gonna put all those people?
Oh, sure, and so the other half of that is, so if the proposed building, right, because I think like a lot of residents are interested in how can we take costs out of that $4+ million, or he's bringing back up the $7 million building or whatever. Like, okay, so if you could remove conference space, if you could remove storage space and use what you have, then what does that do with our, the new construction number? It's kind of like one thought.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Before we get into that, go ahead, Bill.
No, Anthony, from a lot of years of experience, the conference space is probably the most valuable space in that entire building. We just spent 2 hours today at a leadership team meeting talking about all of the training that needs to take place during the school year and trying to figure out where we're going to have that training, because we can only have a certain number of people based on the space limitations we have now. We, in Westford, where I worked for many years, for over 3 decades, we had a conference room that was about 1,100 to 1,200 square feet. It was used constantly. Used by us for training, used by us for training, what's called CPI training, keeping the students safe when they're having a meltdown. We had departments, all town departments that used it. We had planning board that would hold meetings, particularly when there were larger developments being proposed and a lot of neighbors wanted to show up at the meetings. They would be held at our conference room. So it has great utility. And, there's where if you renovate the top floor of where we are now and got that, you can probably fit 50 people in there. And I guess my question to that is, why spend that money when you can only fit 50 people if you got that top floor? It's a waste of, from my perspective, it's a waste of money.
If I could just for a little bit, someone who is watching this meeting right now has texted me saying the audio is a tad weak. So if everybody could make an effort to put their light on and put the microphone closer to themselves and project a little bit more, that would help out until the young lady comes back, and then I can talk to her. But
Will do.
just want to give you that information.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bill.
Well, as I said, 2 hours today, talking about where we're gonna have these meetings for the training that was gonna take place throughout the entire school year. And so that's a real issue.
So just a couple things.
Talk
or-
closer to the mic if you would, Anthony.
Oh, sure. Just a couple things on that bill. So looking at the plan, the proposed space, it looks like there's 50 seats in there, like for the 4 point whatever $1 million building, and it looks like it fits in a space that's, I think, like 33 feet by 37 feet. So I think that the current SCU building's bigger than that, right? 33 by 37 feet.
I don't know the exact
The
dimensions.
outside dimension's 30 by 50.
Okay. So I mean, it's at least equal to what this is.
If that plan that you have there, we need a conference room that's about 1,100 square feet, 1,100 to 1,200 square feet. What we don't want to do is sell ourselves short on that. I'm a big fan of the old statement that's, we never seem to be, in any municipality sometimes, you never seem to be able to appropriate enough money to do a project correctly the
Yeah.
first time, but you have to find twice that amount of money down the road to correct the deficiencies. In our conference room that we had in my former district, we could fit about 250 to 275 people in a 1,100 to 1,200 square foot conference room.
The original plan that we had, it was around 1,400 square feet, the conference room. The meeting space, when we meet at Town Hall, on the other side of the building in the west wing, the Matthew Thornton room, is 1,400 square feet. So that gives you a reference point as to what 1,400 square feet looks like.
And I just want to clarify that, we keep talking about the old design and the new design. Last year, we went through a proposal the entire year with a design in hand. At the last second, the gentleman that used to run this took all the feedback from everybody all over the place, delivered. Everybody was Facebook, online. Everybody was very hot on the tax dollars because our taxes went up. So he made a decision with a small group of people to drastically change the value of the design. In my opinion, and I think the smart result here is, let's take a step back. Let's figure out what's needed. Let's look at all the options. Once we figured out all the viable options, we figure out the space that we need, and then we build a building to that. So when we talk about the different designs and going back to different values, I don't have a value in my head. If you do, I'd be surprised because we don't even know what we're building yet. So I think if we just start fresh on that as opposed to keep going back to different designs, originally we had asked last meeting to do this. This is the Marinese, response to our request to look at the existing buildings. The price is $4.3 million. We can take a vote in here if we need to real quick, just to get people's opinion. But to spend 4.8 with foundation, to spend
Yes.
$4.8 million to renovate those two buildings, I think you'd even say that's stupid, right?
I think that is a very high cost. Yes.
And we've already
I-
agreed
I-
that at 50% construction cost, you need to come up to code. So anything we do to those buildings is going to be millions of dollars.
Well, and I also know though that this could have been a little rushed too.
Sure,
part of
let's
part
say
of
it's rushed
the
and they-
reason here that this is potentially such a
Let's-
large number.
Let's say we did rush them, and as an architect, you need to keep a little buffer in there because you can only bring your price
little
down. You
buffer.
can't go up. Let's say he has 20% contingency in it. You just saved $800,000. We're still at $4 million. At the end of the day, I think we all realize this is not viable.
I think-
Go ahead. If you
Sure.
want to continue to
Yeah,
talk about this, we
absolutely.
can.
But here's, I think, what's important. This proposal
Yep.
is not viable. But I would be interested to walk through, understand the details more. And forgive me if I had bad assumptions joining this committee, but I thought we would do a lot more like working meetings and getting into the actual details together instead of just kind of these like top level quick with like huge info
We want to get
drop-ins.
through the jumble
Yeah,
and then get into the
But
real
I'd
nitty-gritty.
love to like get into the nitty gritty, but I'll just say like I think that there would be value, especially with these numbers being as big as they are, to have multiple.
So it's a code thing, though.
But see,
Regardless of the code, regardless of what this says, it's a code that you need to bring up to old buildings to commercial property. Go ahead.
The reality is, it's just not practical.
I know, but I want to make sure
It's
we
not
vet this
I
out,
know
Finley.
it, but the point is, we can spend weeks trying to go through all of this.
It's going to be tonight. We
It-
just want to
this
make.
just isn't, it's not a practical thing. From the beginning, I believe that. I think I said at the last meeting, the real thing to do with it is tear them down. I think that's what I said.
You've been in this
Because-
for a long time.
And again, let's put forward, we should be going through what you're suggesting, Anthony, but it should be on space, how it's broken up. Is it more cubicles than offices? That's the
Agreed.
conversation we should be having.
Okay.
We want to get there. We just need to get through this one piece for Anthony's benefit and for voters' benefit. It's not just Anthony.
I appreciate
A
that.
bunch of people have that. You've been in this for years. I've been in it for a couple. A lot of people are just looking at this now. So I just want to make sure we vet this out completely. We've only spent 25 minutes on it. I'm good with giving it a few more just to make sure Anthony's concerns are validated.
I mean, the tax impact is a very real thing, and, but, that's, for me to come forward, if I'm gonna do a building, I don't wanna do the addition to the central fire station again. I don't wanna do the ugly blob on the end of the beautiful library again. I'm not into that anymore. If it's not meant to be, then it's not gonna be, but it should be a superintendent's office and a special ed office and all those things together. It should be a real project that's meant to work efficiently and properly. And that's just where I am on it.
Agreed, and I just think and I'm with you. But I think it's important that for the voters' benefit, we vet out everybody's opinion to the end, just to get through it.
So if I may. if I
Yeah,
may,
please, Tim.
I know, I'm playing catch up a little bit because I did miss the last meeting. So I think, Anthony, what you're saying is we've got one bid, right? And you would say
looks very
if you're
big.
more comfortable with multiple bids. So that's just all that is competition, no offense, Paul. It's not a bid. You know what I mean, you know what I mean.
So this is,
It's an estimate,
Using
yeah.
some layman's terms, I got it,
And
right.
additionally, I think it'd be a worthwhile thing for the committee to be able to, as we look at potentially putting this, juxtaposing it to other options, actually participating and talking about the details. Because I just can't help but wonder
Yeah.
if there's extra things in here that don't need to be.
So if I could finish with that, so in the last year, we had, I think, 4 different estimates on the proposal we ended up putting forward to the town. So we did do a lot of comparing, we did do a lot of that work on those proposals. I think that it's probably value add to maybe get a different perspective on this cost, if we're gonna be using it for comparison purposes, but I don't think that it will ultimately affect the outcome. But I now have a couple of questions for the team here. So, taking a step back and out of all of this, if we're looking at the original $6.9 million building, that had a certain amount of square footage, which I think was 11,000?
Yep.
And then, do we recall how many occupants that would hold, the original bid?
It was probably 20, in the 20s.
Yeah, I was gonna say 28.
Yeah.
It was like 28 people in that building?
24 once we.
Right, and so that was the 6.9 bid.
Yeah, correct.
And then we went to an 8,000
Square foot
option.
with a
how
smaller
many-
conference room.
How many occupants?
I think that got rid of maybe around 4 to 5 occupants, right?
So big.
Technology, a couple other people. Yeah.
23 occupants
Yeah,
total?
correct.
Okay, so then now we have this, which would be retrofitting the existing structures. Do we know how many occupants this would ultimately?
Well, if it's going to be a
accommodate?
conference room, there'd be none.
Well,
It would be
assuming
using it on a
sorry, not
day-to-day.
to that point yet, because I'm gonna be really long-winded here.
Okay.
So assuming no conference room, do we know how many occupants a retrofit of those buildings would?
Well, so currently those
12?
It really wouldn't be any more than there are now.
How many are
What
there
have we
now?
got, 14,
Yeah.
13 or 14
14
people?
tops.
Okay, so if I'm just breaking this down kind of mathematically, if we're talking about square footage and number of occupants and usable space, right? I think if you start to look at it from that perspective, and if we put square footage as a premium, because that will include conference rooms, which is very important to us, right? Number of occupants, assuring that it is to code, and the longevity of the structure too. I think if you just look at that very high level, even if this has some room for improvement, I'm not sure that it really cuts the mustard for what we need, as a community and for the purpose of those spaces. So, I'm sorry, that was long.
I think that's a really important point, that if you do this, it doesn't solve your problem. It just and this is why there's a lot of variation in the cost, because this is to bring the buildings up to the current standards of a modern superintendent's office. And that scope is very flexible. Like, what does that mean? There's a lot of variation in what that means. What kind of mechanical system do you have? Do you have good quality, 20, 30-year heat pump, heating and cooling, or do you have something less expensive? Like, there's a huge range of costs in any building. This is a conservative number, because we know when we come in here and give this to you, it's not going to go up, right? Like, there's no way this could be raised in the future. As soon as you put a number out in public, that's the number. So this is a conservative number. I mean, everybody will admit that. Ekman priced it. I told them, be conservative. We don't know very much about these buildings. We're making a lot of assumptions. We have to be conservative. That being said, even if you propose to do a very inexpensive renovation, it's still going to be expensive. It might not be 4.3 million. It might be 3.5 million. But you're still not solving the problem when you do this. You still have, as the contractor said, estimate says, you're going to spend all this money, you're still going to have a piece of junk. Like, you're going to have old houses that you've renovated. It's not laid out the way a superintendent's office should be laid out. There's big advantages to them being all together in one building, as opposed to in two separate buildings with other people in the high school. If you tried to use those buildings for something else and kept them and built a smaller new building, their storage has to be near them. Their conference space has to be near their offices. Having them spread out is a big problem, and that's what you're not solving no matter what you do with these buildings if you're renovating two buildings and trying to use them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variation in how you estimate a project like this. This is really just big picture. It's going to be millions. It's not going to be $500,000. It's going to be 3 million. It's going to be 4 million. It's going to be something in that order of magnitude, depending on what assumptions you make.
Go ahead, Lori.
So I was just going to remind everyone, when we got the fire inspection report, that it was very clear in that report that those buildings were never intended to be those commercial buildings. And so, I think that's a really clear point. So, that we're talking about it, I think, is to give information, but they were never intended to be those buildings.
So as a summary here, we, they need to be updated to code, and it's going to be millions of dollars. I'd like to remind everybody that we're here, and to your point, Anthony, we want to talk meat and potatoes with Paul on a design that makes sense. Are you okay moving past this now?
Yeah.
Or do you want to continue to?
No, I didn't. I think what's important.
I want to make sure we answered all your questions, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's terribly. I don't think anybody here really wants to talk about that 4.8 high number. Like, it's a huge cost that doesn't serve a lot of benefit. If there's different ways to approach it, it's maybe a conversation for a different time. But I think where we could all go, maybe since you're here, and maybe something that everyone would be interested in. So there was obviously originally the larger building that, yes, like there was a lot of, there's too much taxes there. That got brought down to the $4 million building. And even that got voted down last year. And so I would love to get into hey, can we take a look at maybe that and think about what a path forward would look like to maybe scrub any more cost out of it?
Absolutely love it. I just want to be sure, you mentioned bring it up at another time. We're renovating those. I want to be sure that we're done talking about that.
About alternatives?
Renovating those two old buildings out there. I want to be sure that that's vetted for you, because none of us wants to go back there.
So you have space. I think it's
unusable
potentially-
because it's not commercially rated.
You say it's
They're too
unusable, and I wonder if we could do any more creative thinking around
We
that.
can't.
And maybe not in this, okay?
Yeah, well, we can't.
Maybe
It's
we
a
can't be
code thing.
creative.
It's a code thing. You
No,
can be as
it's-
creative
Well,
as you
it's not
want.
though,
You're not
right?
going to go.
So he said up to 50% of the value, changes that you make before you trigger code. So no, it's not a code thing. You could potentially do things.
To
and
add
use
an
that
elevator
space.
is.
So the elevator
That
costs-
elevator is the
Sure,
cost
but if-
of that building if we had the
But
half
if
of
you
it.
don't need
That would still
people
be.
getting into the basement.
What do you mean you, as of now you do?
You don't have
Yes.
any choice of who you hire. You can't hire
Sure,
someone
but
who's
you
not
don't have to
handicapped
That's
or handicapped
discrimination.
and say they can't work in the.
But
you
if
can't
you
do
kept,
that.
but if you kept the SAU building, Okay, you could make it so nobody's sitting in the basement, so
Yep.
they don't have a reason to go down there to meet
So
some
what about
people.
the other building? Are you gonna only tell people that they can apply for a job in the student services or the
That one implicitly
superintendent
has
building?
more costs, I think, that would need to be done, like, that
So
one,
one
because
right
of the
after.
messed up basement, you would definitely kind of like tip. So, and they also wanna put a few parking spaces there, I think there's like 8 parking spaces or something that people wanted to put there. So more
Go ahead,
likely
Larry.
the blue building would get knocked down, and the green one might be something that could be kept.
First thing we have to do.
Go ahead, Larry.
Once we do that, it triggers.
What I was gonna say is, you know, at school board, meetings, when we have a discussion, then what happens is people take a vote.
Yeah, let's take a
So-
vote.
So that's, you know, so
The-
how,
And I'm with you on the vote. I
so
just,
it's kind of like Robert's rules, we
Yeah.
discuss, you know, we don't always build consensus. Sometimes things are 4-1, sometimes they're 2-3, so, and then.
and the small difference is the school board's actually decision, you know, the decision matters. Ours is a recommendation, so I think it's important that we just vet everybody out. We can certainly vote and move on, and I think the rest of us are good with that, so I think at this point we can, but I just don't want this to come back up in a meeting from now and say, oh, we didn't go down that road, because I want to make sure we do. Go ahead.
Well,
You're right. The focus on the tax impact isn't something that we really, it's not my concern sitting here. My
Well, it was
concern
everybody's
sitting here
concern
is
at the
coming
deliberative
up
session,
with-
though.
Well, that is, but that's the school board's, if they see what we're coming up with is too expensive, they should say something, and there should be ideas of what could be cut out of it. That's our focus, is silliness, and it's a waste of my time, quite frankly, because I just don't, to be talking about the 2 old buildings, knowing that it just won't work. It just won't work for all the reasons we've already heard, and even if the prices could be cut in half, this, the suggested estimate, it still is not a good thing, and so, if ultimately in the end the townspeople say, we don't want it because we don't want to spend the money, then that's what it is,
Can I
but
ask
it's
That's
not our
fine.
job.
I just
Can I
want to
say-
make sure we vet everything out.
Can
And
I-
I'm sorry to waste your time, Finley. We're almost done.
Well, it's just a little bit of a frustration, quite
I get it.
frankly.
I was
because-
frustrated when I spent all last year and they voted it down. So I'm with you. That's
Well,
why I want to make
and-
sure that
and
we put our
to-
effort in
And
this
to touch on
year.
that, because Anthony was right, it took a downfall
I'm
the
with you,
second
Ralph, so
time
I'm with
around, but it's because of what happened that night, strictly, and it was just, it was just a bad move all around, the change and all that, so.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead,
Bill.
I was just gonna say, Anthony, and I think we all appreciate your probing and questions, because there's probably 1,000 other people,
Several
taxpayers out there, that wanna ask the same questions. The reality of it is, I wanna go back to something Finley said a while back. No matter what we do to the building, we're not increasing the square footage, and that is the issue. From my perspective, there are 2 issues here. What do we need for a new building? And secondly, what do we do with the existing buildings? Do we repurpose them or do we demo them? Because they're of no use. They just can't accommodate. Whatever we do, we cannot create more square footage, and that is the fundamental issue.
So let's just do
I'm
a
sorry.
quick. Go ahead. Last
Well,
one.
So, first of all, half of the blue building is unused. So when you say you can't get any more square footage, literally half of the blue building is abandoned and unused space.
See, this is, and Finley, to your point, Bill, to your point, the reason I want to dig into this so much is because when these questions come up, some people that are listening to this are going to think, oh, you know what, he's right. It's important for me, as someone who spent a year doing this and spending another year doing it, that we vet these out. Although we know this is unreasonable, I think it's very important, and I'm not insulting you. I think we're all in agreement with that, but we do need to make sure that you're comfortable. Now, I will say, Paul is here to get into the nitty-gritty, and I think this is a little bit of a waste of his time. So I do want to, if everybody's okay with it, we can put a vote or whatever, but I do kind of want to get into, let's assume this doesn't work, because I think you're going to come around to that point after we vet out all your questions. Do we want to get into the design, to Finley's point, and to everybody else, and to dial in an actual size and then work backwards to a value? Does that make sense?
I think we should start with a target budget in mind and say, what would it take to take that amount of money? Because we want this to pass, right?
Well, you're just pulling out a random number if you just do that. That's just a random number that you just made up. in
So
your head.
if I could just interrupt, so
Absolutely.
we're playing, we want to play to a price point, right? So it's like the middle school, we put what do? We put a 15-year roof on it, right? We had to replace the roof. Cost us $1.2 million. We did that because it was to a price point. Instead of being $18 million, it had to come in at $17,500,000 and something dollars, which was a bargain back then. But there were certain value engineered things that we had to do in order to get it to that price point. The main issue that I see here when you're looking at the fire inspection report is right now I'm going to say it, illegally occupying that building as an office space. First thing we have to do is to have a change of use permit. Once we pull a change of use permit, then everything in that fire inspector report we have to do. We have to put in a sprinkler system. We have to do an egress from the basement. We have to figure out a way how to get rid of the code violations for the ceiling being too low in the basement because of the ductwork. That involves raising the foundation. The foundation of that building is concrete block. That's not a poured foundation. In both buildings, it's concrete block. That's why it leaks all the time. So there's a lot of work that has to be done structurally to that building. And in the process of doing such, there's going to be perhaps some damage that occurs to the building that's going to have to be repaired. So it just kind of tumbles downward.
The new building that you proposed,
Yeah.
the smaller one, we're going to call it, did that sufficiently meet the needs of what you guys need?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And what was the value of that?
It was $4.8 million.
So is that what you want us to work on building toward?
Is that number still valid given what's going on in the industry right now?
Go ahead.
We think the 4.8 may have been a lower number than it should have been.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It was picked arbitrarily, and we had to make the building
Yeah.
meet that. And Hutter said they could build something for that, but I'm not sure you would have been thrilled with what you ended up with. So I think you should pick a building square footage and then have various contractors estimate what it should cost to build
That's what I was.
a long-term, solid construction building for
So
that size.
So I go back to exactly. Let's
Yeah.
figure out what our needs are, and then let's build to it.
So
Yes, Lori.
I was just gonna make 2 points. Number one, I think that, going back to Anthony's point on the buildings, I think that's why it's critical that we open those buildings so town people can come and see the buildings. Everyone who came to see the buildings, everyone who toured the buildings, came out with the same idea, that these buildings were not habitable. They were not what we wanted, but we didn't do it enough, and we didn't have enough people in the town come and see those buildings. The blue building, obviously, if you go into the basement part of that building, it's disgusting. But, people have to come and see it to see why. Why are we not using that building? There's a reason why we're not using that building. It's not that we don't need the space, we need the space. And then, going back to Finley's point, I think that the charge of this committee is to work to design, to take the charge that Lori Peters gave to create a superintendent's building and make a recommendation to the school board. And then the school board has to, do the other parts.
Shane, may I ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Bill.
Before we go on to taking a look at what type of structure and square footage, who's occupying it, would it be worth this committee taking a vote as to whether or not the committee considers the renovation and reuse for a central office and SAU purposes viable or not viable, and just get that off the table
Absolutely. I'd entertain
once
a
and for
motion.
all?
If anybody would like to make one.
I'll make a motion to vote. So we'll discuss whether renovating the existing structures is a viable option or not.
Viable, worth even looking at and exploring in any detail?
Uh,
Because it hasn't been.
I would say that we have details in front of us. We've got data.
You're just proposing your own motion. You can't be interrupted. If somebody
Oh,
wants to
sorry.
amend your motion, you can,
Sure.
but say your
Yeah.
motion the way you want it
So
to.
the motion would be to determine whether we feel that renovating the existing structures is a valuable option or not.
Is there a second?
But that was a two-edged, I don't
Oh,
think that.
it's a viable option. Don't say the or not then.
Is a viable option.
Or not, that makes it so we have to pick instead of just voting yes or no.
Right, so,
Essentially, I move
okay.
that this is not a viable option, or this is a viable option.
I'm new to this.
I know it.
Well, you're doing good, dear Mr.
I don't know what
Brown.
you're
So I'll get a little closer. Okay, so the motion is to determine
Renovating is a viable option.
a
No.
viable option.
Is that,
Yep, I
No.
took the
you
or not
wanna
off.
get the words right?
The answer would be
If
yes or
you
no.
could, you could put it as, I move that we don't look into renovation of the two old buildings, I guess. But
So
you
then
need,
you made the motion.
I can do that.
Do we have a
I
second?
didn't even make it a good motion, did I?
Well, but I'd like to amend it further.
You can do it afterwards. We just need a second to that motion
Make a
first.
motion and
I
then
move
phrase.
that we don't further look into the use of the green and blue buildings.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Just calm down. This is the part where you discuss.
Sorry, I'm also new to this.
Okay.
So forgive me. So last meeting, something that, was said very straightforward and clearly was that in all of the years that options have been explored, whether Rite Aid or whatever else, that nobody ever seriously considered looking at renovating these buildings. Like it's
That's not true.
recorded.
That is inaccurate.
Okay. So you guys have plans somewhere
There's
for
been
that?
plenty of them over the last 30 years,
No,
published.
We didn't have
'Cause
plans for those buildings specifically, but the buildings, it can't, Anthony, it's a total waste of time
Well-
to beat this horse.
So that's your,
all
do
that
you have
I'm-
any more further discussion?
Well, all that
'Cause
I'm
we have a
saying there
motion on the
is,
table.
if people want to basically pass this idea of like, we're not going to explore it,
Any further.
but literally like this, like, quick come up with some big numbers, like,
It's not quick come up with big
that's all
numbers.
that I can find. I haven't heard or seen anything different. than
Anthony,
this.
there's a reasonable process here. You need to bring the buildings up to code. In order to do it, you have to do all this stuff that's listed here. This isn't a question, it's not an opinion. Okay, maybe he has a buffer in it because it's a budget and he can't bring his price
Yeah,
down.
absolutely.
Okay, Anthony, save $1 million. It's now 3.8. Congratulations, you just renovated the two buildings for 3.8 million. I think we both know that at this point, and trust me, I'm all about making sure you're heard, but it's just getting a little ridiculous at this point. So we have a motion on the table. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Caitlin.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that we're discussing that they would not be used as a SAU building. Not that they wouldn't be used / demoed / that space would become something else. We're saying that they would not be a suitable SAU building because
Special ed.
special ed. Oh yeah, SAU and special ed. Sorry, that they would not be suitable for our SAU and special ed buildings. That's what we're discussing.
Based only on this. one
No,
estimate.
But no,
observation, just
that,
look at the
well,
buildings.
that's what I
The
mean. Like
refit-
so,
The refit alone
Right,
is
so-
brutal. Just
so
to try-
if you
even
were
if you cut it in
to-
half, it's still not worthwhile.
if you were saying like, well, we have this space downstairs that could be utilized. If we wanted to utilize that space downstairs, that would trigger all of those things that we were talking about that would make it so that we actually can't utilize that space until we do all those other things, which is just going to cost more money and not solve the SAU student services being in 1950, 60 houses in the middle of the school. That won't have solved that still. So that wouldn't make it a solution for SAU and student services, right? We're still just discussing them as the solution for the SAU and student services, not as a
The motion was that we
Great
would no longer look into
driveway.
renovating the two old buildings, period.
full, right. So we're not renovating
Just
them.
expanded on that.
Yes,
period.
no, we were just discussing it. We're not talking about that we wouldn't use it as a pavement or as a, I don't know, something demoed somewhere down the road that can be a garden, but it wouldn't be for the SAU and student services.
And here's why I think it's reasonable. Here's why I think it's reasonable to take that position. The return on investment is not going to yield us the benefit we would have if we invested that same amount of money in a different way. So that, I think that's why it's worthy of maybe passing on that whole renovating concept, because it will be close in dollars. I mean, let's say that there's some margin here, but it's not gonna get to a point where it's significantly different, I
Well,
don't believe, with
he's-
the data that we have, right? So it's all about that return on the investment that we're gonna make for the community. $4 million gets us a brand-new building with 11,000 square, or 8,000 square feet. $4 million gets us two houses that are renovated to code.
Yep, and I
So
guess, where I go with that, you talk about, if you took X amount or whatever. earlier, sorry, is it Perry? I'm so bad with names.
Oh, Finley.
Finley, sorry.
No, that's.
Finley said even if you were to cut the number in half, he wouldn't want to do it. And I think there's a lot of people who think, I mean, those buildings, which I get it, nobody in here likes them. But, you know, they served a purpose for like 40 years, right? So for $2 million, you tear them down to the sticks, build them back up, and you get another 40 years out of it. And the only thing that you're not getting is, you know, a big meeting space.
So, hang on. Before we go any further, the $2 million you just threw out there was a completely fabricated number
Sure.
that's not based on any sort of
No, I'm
information
saying, I'm
whatsoever.
saying cut it in half.
He,
It's still not
he
worth
was
it.
using that loosely, and,
Yep.
and you still could. It's 2.5 million, and I still agree with him. But I think it's important that, and I'm not saying this is happening, but we don't just want to randomly throw out things to sow doubt in the public's mind. I think
Sure.
it's important that we talk real stuff,
Data.
with real data,
Peace.
with an architect that's done this in many towns over the last however many years, 50 years. And Tim makes a great point. Let's think logically about it. This isn't this isn't logical. But again, we have a motion on the table. Is there any further discussion before we vote? All right. Do we have to
However you want.
You say all
the all those in favor?
Can we hear it one more time?
Yeah, just to clarify.
I move that we no longer look into renovating the two old buildings, period.
Those in favor? I don't know.
You gotta count.
Oh,
You got
1,
the count?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I can't
Oh,
vote.
5.
But you can put your opinion.
Those against.
my opinion is vote yes.
Yes, okay.
I don't think there's a reason that we
5,
should take
so
option
one
off the
against.
table, so.
Okay, so 1 against.
5.
Motion passes.
And school board member voted,
Or
voted
Leaned.
in favor of the motion.
Opinion. She didn't vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, offered.
Stated opinion.
Opined.
Okay.
So I know we have Paul here to
Yeah.
go into the details, but I wanted to go on a tangent a little bit. So we talk about the money, right? We talk about the cost and that being a main contributor to how we decide, how the community decides what we're gonna do, right? I'm pretty sure we had a bond that was expiring, and I'm looking at you, Matt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that bond expired. Do you recall what the footprint, the financial footprint of that bond?
Yeah, that was around $425,000, around 400 grand.
400 grand a year?
Yeah. It
And-
expired expired last year.
Okay, so is there a possibility that with the current tax rate, based off of the current spend, if that bond, timing associated with that bond expiring, that we have an additional footprint that we could work within financially prior to, or instead of affecting
The
next year's
footprint would have
taxes?
happened last year.
So we missed that opportunity?
Yes.
So then it's essentially the tax season that just happened, that 400K was a detractor, right? It came out of what we're paying in taxes.
Yeah.
And then there was additional growth that
Right.
the community was not happy with.
You do have a Honeywell lease for around $400,000 a year. I think there's around 3 to 4 more years left on that.
Okay, so that would be 3 or 4 years of 400K.
Correct.
So do we feel that 400K is a year on a tax burden standpoint is a number that is normal?
10 cents on the rate.
I was gonna say 8, but he's the finance
8,
guy.
yeah. 8 is good because your value's gone up. So, yeah,
So-
8 is good.
So 400K tends to be the type of
Yeah.
bonds that we get, that are what, 15 year, 20 year?
We worked out a
15 year.
15-year.
15 years. So
Yeah.
how much is 400K over 15 years?
This was the bond schedule from last time.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was the
Take a
bond.
look at
schedule.
that one.
Oh, it was
That was the
470.
That gets you close.
4.8,
That was the 6.9.
6.9.
But you can use a ratio there.
Yeah, this got us to 6.9, right? But it was 470K.
Yeah.
So 470K a year to the community is 6.9 over the 15 years.
Yes.
Right, so I think maybe if we can calibrate to what the annual impact is to each person who lives here
Oh,
from a
sure.
tax standpoint, and we can communicate what that impact is and like how that equates to a tax rate change for me, you know, on Doll Road. I think that's important in how we sell this, or not sell it, but communicate this opportunity to the public. And I think that's what was missed in the last go-around. We threw $6.9 million at people. And I don't know if everyone really understood that $6.9 million was with a bond that's expiring, and then we're gonna add 470K on that, was basically a net zero to what you'd be spending on your taxes,
It's actually less.
right?
Is that,
And that's a great point.
is that sheet you have from the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank?
Yes,
Okay, on the far right column, there's a point something number.
yes.
That's the amount per thousand for the principal and interest payment back then.
Yeah,
Given
and
the
the
net,
rate was 4%, which is pretty good, too.
yeah, correct.
And to your point, Tim, that was misinformation on social media about that, about
Yeah,
the,
so-
the impact. So it's important.
Yeah,
It's
so,
great-
so
great
I,
point.
I think where we're struggling is this value thing, right? The cost. What is the investment that we're making? What is the effect to each taxpayer? And if we can dollarize this, like, and if we're gonna say 400K is our number, that gives us around a $6 million budget, theoretically, to operate within. And if we can translate what 400K to our annual spend is and how that, what that equals each taxpayer to in some way, that might put it in perspective, because if 400K meant to me, I spend another $50 a year.
But respectfully, I don't
I
think
don't-
our job is to like sell things to the community.
No,
Our
just
It's not a
inform.
sell. I
He's
use the
just
bad
informing.
term.
I
That's
mean-
a
I'm
great
not
point.
saying sell. I'm
But
saying we
like-
need to communicate the
but
facts,
but
right?
but
And
let's
these are the
but I
facts.
think like let's look at what we have to do, right, and like work to get to the best number that we can. That'll help make the people who don't want who there are people lots of people want to pay as little taxes as possible. They don't care about like number games. So like let's actually just work
when you
to
say
do
number
the
game-
needs.
Yeah,
So
go
do
ahead,
you see
please
what
do.
do you see what I'm getting at is that the investment that the town is making, if it doesn't have a dramatic effect on actual taxpayers' taxes, then they're keying up on, the community's keying up on things that aren't really relevant to good decision making. Because if it's $50 a year that I have to pay more in taxes to get an SAU building with 11,000 square feet in a community center, conference room that I'm going to use or what have you, right? I would think that that is an investment that a lot of people are willing to make,
But what a
but we
lot
have to
Hang
define
on.
what that investment
Let's,
is.
let's keep it in order. Let's keep it in order. Are you good, Bill? I think you had next.
No, I was just gonna say, just from a lot of bond issues in the system I used to work with in Massachusetts, that understanding of the amortization schedule is very important and the impact on taxes, because a lot of taxpayers do think, oh my God, we're gonna spend $6.9 million, and they don't actually stop to think, what is the annual impact, as you indicated, that is an absolute reality that we used to deal with. Look, my first 20 years in my former school district, we had 8 major school construction projects. We didn't stop because we were the fastest growing community in Massachusetts at the time. And that was a key, is to making sure people understood what is the impact on the tax rate and what is the impact on their outlay, their annual outlay in taxes.
Yeah. We need to translate this data to be understood by everybody.
Laura, you had your hand up as well.
So what I was going to say is, so I think the school board, when they set the goal in the goals meeting in June of last year for the SAU building, it was before the tax rate. And what happened with the tax rate is the industrial and commercial went down and residential went up. And that bump is what caused a lot of people to be very concerned. And so we understood that. So as a school board, understanding that we felt that this was a critical need, that we went in and we cut a lot from the budget last year. We said we can hold off on, a new math curriculum. We can, we won't hire any, new people. We made those decisions. We made those cuts. So the school board does do that work, because we look at what is the percentage, what's going to happen. But what I really like what you said, Tim, is that we need to communicate that better, so people say, all right, so this program is going to be this on the, and I think on the town side, when you go in to vote, they say this is what it's going to be on the text, but so I just wanted to say that we did do a lot of that work, but again, it obviously didn't get communicated.
Yeah, when we-
I couldn't find it either. So and I appreciate it just wasn't published clearly, and that's part of what we're here for. That's part of what we
When
can
we
help with.
did the voter's guide, we had the tax impact of every single warrant article on there. Perhaps that wasn't highlighted broadly enough.
I don't think it was put in a way that would tell someone who's just showing up, who's never had any, never watched us, never listened to this, never had any participation in this, how is this gonna affect me? That's really what they
Right.
wanna know. And if we can say to them, we can articulate, well, this means $30 more a year to you, or $50 more a year to you in your
I think
taxes.
I think we used the $500,000 house thing, and I think it's like $40 on a $500,000 house.
So Matt, this point at the end, we do this times 500 is how we
Yeah,
figure it out.
correct.
Okay. So the I'm not going to go with the lowest year. The highest year is there's only one of these years.
Yeah.
Is 0.15. So if you do
Yeah.
0.15 times 500, which is a $500,000 house, $75
Yep.
bucks. That's
Yep.
the most expensive year.
That was on the 6.9.
That was on the 6.9.
Correct.
So we bring that down to 5 if we can, or 5.5, or whatever we're able to whittle that down to. We're talking about $60, the most expensive year. Then there's every single year goes down substantially. I mean, if anybody wants to see, it's
Yeah, it's a level principal bond, so the interest decreases over the term of the bond.
So
Right.
are you,
So I think that's
Shannon,
very-
you're saying $60 per taxpayer? Is that what
for a
you-
$500,000 house. If you have a $500,000 house, that 1 year costs you $60.
The highest year.
That's the highest year.
Yep.
The first year is a fifth of that.
There's nothing.
1/5. It's
'Cause
0.03
it's
to
a-
1.15. So
Because
that's
it's
$10
a
bucks.
half year's interest payment only.
Yep. Go ahead, Paul.
What we'll often see school districts do is tell taxpayers like an average of the first 5 years, because there's nothing the first year, then a big spike, and then it
Right.
goes down. So if you show them like the first 5 year average, that gives them a pretty good idea, but you're not getting like these weird 1 year effects. So it's just more representative.
I think this is really important, and
Sorry to derail.
no. So on that math, just so you know, that would be $57 averaged out over the first 5 years, and then it goes down from there. So I think that's great, Tim, because that's real information. We're not guessing. We're not selling. We're
No,
just
it's
giving the
57.
public the information.
In that, so you're saying that
In the voter's guide.
value ties back to the 6.9?
Correct.
That we're talking about, or did you say 5?
Nope, that's
Okay.
6.9.
Yeah,
So if we were
6.9.
able to get it to 5, we're talking 8. Yeah.
I think that's important for people to know.
Very. In fact, we need to publish that somewhere so that we have real information out there. Anthony, I think you had another question up.
So I guess a few things. So one, yeah, and I think part of the very real issue that we see here and in other places, but here for sure, you get $50 here, $60 there, $40 here, $30 here, and they accumulate year over year over year, multiple of these projects, and that adding up to an increasing tax burden, that's what really affects people. And so saying like, oh, here's another thing, gee, it's only X amount. So I think that cumulative effect really matters. But something else that I'm really, as an individual, whenever I have the option to just pay for something and not pay extra because of interest, and especially long-term interest, personally, I try to do that. So I always wondered, like, if you had a thing like this, like, could you even on the ballot have as like a kicker, like say, there's going to be some ballot article or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then like, if there was like a kicker article that goes with it, like 7A, and it was kind of like, would you rather pay it down or shorter, and show the accumulated additional interest that you would have to pay if you were shackled with these long-term commitments?
We're talking about a 4% rate. 3.5%.
4% APR, like that adds up to a lot of money, right? Or is it just a flat 4%?
It's you can go through this. It's going to change anyway because this was a little while ago and
Yep.
it's going to go back down. But go ahead, Bill. I mean,
Could
there's
I-
fiscal
No,
responsibility.
I just
and-
want to
20
remind
years
everybody,
middle school.
something we said in the budget meeting last year is the cost of doing nothing is not nothing,
That's exactly right.
okay? It escalates every single year. We all know that. So, look, we've all seen that for decades, that you just don't want to make a decision sometimes, but you don't tell the taxpayer that it's going to cost 3 times the amount of money
Yeah.
down the road. And so
Can't have.
let's try and do the responsible thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is instead of picking a number, let's take a look at the facility that we said, here is a reasonably sized facility. Here are the offices that we need to accommodate everyone responsibly in the central office function and special education function. There's only so much value engineering we can do.
Yep.
And so instead of picking a number, I think we ought to stick with what is it that works, and how do we work the bid process and and value engineer it so that we can make sure that we've got the most efficient facility.
Bill, you've done this a bunch over the years. Westford was one of the highest rated schools in the state. What do you recommend at our next step?
We take a look at the facility that was proposed and see if it still is reasonable, it's prudent, and then take a look at, what an approximate cost of that facility might be.
Is there a
Instead of
motion
trying
to organize this?
Instead
Yeah.
of trying to pick a number and back into that number.
Yep.
I totally agree with it, because again, I'm going back to my original thought when I said, we really shouldn't even be, as our committee, shouldn't be concerning ourselves to that great of a degree about the impact. That's the school board's job, the value, putting together what we need. I thought one of the comments that I heard that I thought had legitimate value, and it might not change things, but it's the cubicles instead of each person having an individual office. And maybe that's what it has to be anyhow, but that's something, I thought that's a pretty interesting thought. Obviously, there's people that can't do that, but, and that's not even for tonight. It's just one of those things that we should talk about as the process continues. And then when we come up with a building that seems to fit the needs, find out what we're kind of looking at through the estimate or whatever you call it at that level. I know it's not a quote. And then maybe do the more value engineering. What can we do maybe to trim it off to help out in that regard? But my primary focus, because I'm not a school board member, my primary focus is not what that end cost is going to be. I appreciate the impact, and if it's too big, it surely will get a no vote. But to work it from that angle, as you've just suggested, Bill, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and it is the school board's responsibility. They need help from us to get this information out to the public. The school board's been trying to build one of these for over 25 years now. So let's, I know there's responsibilities and everything else. I just want to get as much information out there as possible. Go ahead.
There's a couple of ways to approach this. And Merrimack has always gone design build, which is, Tim, you know about this. You work at BAE, or you worked at BAE. Shh, quiet, sorry. But, which is kind of like building the plane as you're flying it, right? However, we did that with the middle school. We did that with the vestibules that we put in the buildings. We did that with the kindergarten construction grant. I did that with the safety complex in Hooksett when I used to work in Hooksett years ago. Done it with a lot of projects. There's another way is to have a full design that's done, mechanicals, you know exactly what you're getting, and put it out to bid formally. I believe that's the process in Mass, Bill?
Yes, it is. Most certainly is.
Most certainly is. So you know exactly what you're getting, and you get a price that you can save actually money on versus a design build, because what you're getting then is people are hedging their bets because they're not really sure of what they're going to give you in the end, or nor are you sure of what you're going to receive as a customer. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother hour-long meeting discussing those options. Maybe more than that. But most projects, well, traditionally most projects, they would get approved by the voters. You will spend 8 months designing the project, and then you'd put it out to bid, get prices from various contractors, and you'd go with the lowest contractor usually. That's one option. More recently, the last 10 years, what's become more popular is hiring a construction manager, which is, it's not exactly what you're saying, a design build, but it's a variation. Construction manager works with you from the beginning, even at this stage, and they estimate the project as you go so that you can make decisions on value. So if a construction manager is estimating the project for you, while we're designing it, they can say, okay, heat pump heating system is going to cost this, and a boiler is going to cost that, and which one do you want? So you can make decisions along the way. And then by the time it goes out to bid, your value is much more likely to come in at the number you expect it to come in at. If you just put a project out to bid, I don't know if you've read this happen, but in this last few years, it's been really challenging to estimate something, put out to bid, and have it come in where you want, because prices are crazy.
Sometimes contractors like to just fish, throw out a line.
I mean, recently, we actually have stopped trying to estimate projects because it's always wrong, because prices are going up in lumber 50% in the last 2 months, and then in steel, and then something else. It's crazy. It's starting to settle out a little bit now. But most projects recently that we've done, school projects, have been with the construction manager. Not exclusively, but because it gives the school district more confidence that when you get to the point you're putting out to bid, you're still putting out to bid to subcontractors. Construction manager is just a bidding agent. They bid it for you to all the subcontractors. But then you are pretty confident it's going to come into the cost that you think it's going to come in at.
So
As
who
opposed to-
would be the construction manager?
So in New Hampshire, there's several large school construction managers. Harvey, Ekman, Hutter, Bonapage Stone in the past, North Branch. There's
Who was the last one? Not North Branch, who was the other one you said?
Bonapage
Bonapage
Stone.
We've worked with them before.
They've done more design build lately. I think we haven't worked with them recently. But there's Engelberth. There's who else is there? A couple out of the Lebanon area. There's about 6 or 7 big contractors that are construction managers and do most of the school work in New Hampshire.
The town did a highway garage a few years ago, and we did the construction management, and I was trying to think of the name. The company we used, it was a small company, but I want to say it was Cornerstone or something like that.
There are some smaller ones too. Yeah, there's
And it was a wonderful process, because
Mhm.
didn't know if I was sold on it, but we did have a committee that got together with the construction manager, the general manager of the site, doing the work,
mhm.
and every week we'd be sitting down, and it got, before we even started digging, it was, the excavation cost went from an estimated $200,000 to $600,000, and I thought it was a $3.2 million project that was gonna be over, but that's when the value engineering came in, and it made it work.
Right.
And
As opposed to doing the drawings, putting out to bid, then you find out you're double the budget, and you're like, whoa, now what do we do? So then you have to go back to the drawing board. So, construction manager in a market where prices are fluctuating a lot can give you some value. 20 years ago, when prices were 3% a year went up, we knew exactly what a project was going to cost, and it was very easy to estimate it. But now, I mean, the last 5 years, it's been like all over the place.
Paul, may I ask a question of Paul? Sure. Paul, is the process, because I haven't been associated with building anything in New Hampshire, but is the process similar to what I used to experience? Is you could file sub-bids, and then a general contractor will come in and...
This isn't
New
public
Hampshire
records.
doesn't have most of the bidding regulations that Massachusetts has.
Okay.
Live free or die. You can do pretty much whatever you want with your bidding. In Massachusetts, it's a lot more regulated
Yeah.
how you have to go about it. But New Hampshire, you can do almost anything.
Okay.
And what did,
No, go ahead.
it's just a continuation of this real quick. The beauty of that, I felt also, is they have contractors that they'll bid for the electrical work for the different projects. And you can even refine it down more. We wanted Merrimack business, if they were qualified, to be able to take part in the project, so.
Right.
And they did all that for
Yeah.
us.
You have control over the subs. So say you get three mechanical bids, and you know that this one subcontractor is really good, and you've had good experience with them, and the other two are, the reputations aren't quite as good. You can go with subcontractor A, even if their price is a little higher, you can make that decision. Okay, we want to spend a little bit more and go with the contractor we really trust and know will do a good job. So it gives you control over the subs.
If I
also.
recall correctly, we interviewed Bonapage Stone and Hutter as the construction manager, right? And we had the president of both companies come in, and Gary Bertram from Hutter, he was chosen as the construction manager. So in turn, we specified at the time we had a really good relationship. This is 24 years ago, with Interstate Electrical. So we specified we wanted Interstate to do the electrical. They had a good relationship with Mayscom that I think did the brickwork. They had a good relationship with. We actually farmed out a lot of the hardware and everything to Merrimack Building Supply right down here. So we specified we wanted to get local people involved in it too. That was one of the priorities. So they handled the management of everything.
If that is a priority, but to Paul's point, I'm on the electrical side. Paul, I'm in distribution, so I'm very familiar. And design build contractors are great. They make 15 to 20% more than a specified bid. So if you have a good design and you put it out to bid, you can get a fluctuation of numbers, whereas the design build, you're going to be a little higher. The other thing is the market is going to change. And I mentioned this last time, we were like this, we were through COVID, everything's like this. We've slowed down significantly. It hasn't hit yet, but it's going to. And when it does, you're going to have a lot of contractors that need work. And, they're not going to be bad contractors. Right now, if you get a contractor that's looking for work, they're probably not that good. There's going to be a lot of people working for work. So do we need to make that decision now?
No.
Or can we start the design, answer all the questions with the design,
Yeah,
and then get down that road? And
Yeah.
we already have 2 budgets.
yeah. You don't need to make that decision until after, I mean, you don't have to make it until actually you have a project approved by the voters.
Right.
Then you can decide. If you know you want to go with the construction manager, there's a benefit to having them on board earlier. But you can also hire them just do estimating. That's what we've been doing. Just have 3 different contractors estimate the project, which kind of gives you the same thing. Because you're not doing real design work before the vote. You're doing conceptual design.
Yeah, and basically that's what all we be doing. We're not,
Right.
we're not you. You know
Right.
what I mean? But we're going to answer the questions that make general sense to us as taxpayers, and then put it out to bid.
Yep.
So does that make sense to get into that design now? Is that what we want to do as a committee? Let's open it up. Where do we want to start, Gage? I mean, feel free to jump in.
Your Bill's first comment, let's look what we got and make sure it still fits the bill.
Okay.
It's too bad we didn't have a projection
Yeah.
that the public can see it also.
I don't know how we set that up at this point.
So-
That's what I asked for. But we didn't expect we were gonna need it tonight.
Plus, I don't have the file to put the schematic up there.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
So I was gonna say, I think if we're gonna do that next step, I think we should talk about all the next steps. You have next step on the agenda, like, so the next steps would be to be able to bring the proposals from last year, put them up there. What are some other next steps? And one of the questions I was gonna ask Finley was, you know, when the town was gonna pass the highway garage, I know the first time it didn't pass and the second time it did pass. What did you guys do different from the first time when it failed to the second time that it passed?
Didn't touch a truck.
No, we
Because my
had,
kids
we
came
had
to
the
touch a
Easter,
truck.
we had the Easter egg hunt, I think it was. No, it would have been the winter carnival, I think, at Wasserman Park. And
Yes.
from there, Public Works was pushing touch a truck over to the old highway garage, and that's what did it, I'm convinced.
So that would be like a
Stars
next step, like,
align.
you know, like, obviously, you know, setting up Saturday tours and that, but how are we gonna get the word out? You know,
So-
how are we going to let people know?
But I mean, this sounds like we're getting back into the business of like selling the projects. Like I thought we were
Cross-selling.
gonna, well, if you're trying to figure out how to do touch a trucks or whatever to make people wanna vote for it.
Right.
I don't even know what a touch truck is.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, no, but that's the point taken. We, you know,
So,
that was just commentary, but.
Yeah, no, I don't know what it is. I don't,
Yeah, I'd just like to make a suggestion that we actually hold off talking about the design until we can project it and the public can see it. Because I think that's one of the critical elements and why these meetings are televised is we want to make sure everyone has as much information as possible.
Well, that's why I was kind of hoping we did 2 questions before we had Paul in, but, you know, makes sense. So today we did solve that, you know, the existing 2 buildings are not viable. We've all agreed on that. We've done the research. It's not going to work. So now we move forward to the next steps of this awareness is what, you know, is what Lori's calling it, which is important. I don't know that that's selling other than just showing people the actual conditions because we don't want to hide them. These are, right?
I thought.
We
the
just want to give
focus
information.
Was on how do we optimize, like, how do we make sure that we have something conceptually on the table that fits the needs and what's the cost? I thought that's the next steps. and we
Definitely.
go
And to
from
Bill's
there.
point, it'd be good to have it up there so that the public can see what we're talking about,
Sure.
which I agree with. And I'm sorry that I didn't prep that.
And I will just
We
mention.
will have it for next meeting.
That, you know, this is available on the website, right? So like theoretically, someone watching could like pull it up in a PDF and follow along, or watching the video after. They could pull it up if we wanted to have that conversation now, but up to you.
It makes sense what Bill's saying to me, but if Anthony, if you want to bring up something specific that's in your head, I'm good with discussing it.
I just was interested to get into some of the conversation and the details of the building.
But if people aren't, nobody's watching this right now, and if they are, nobody has their computer. They're watching it on their computer. It doesn't. I don't know that that's doable for a lot of people.
That's fine.
Yeah, it'd probably just be easier to.
One of
word
the
it.
issues we talked about is communication.
Yep.
And that's a priority of the school board. And without the public being able to see this easily by tuning into this meeting, I think we're placing ourselves, we're placing them at a decided disadvantage. So that's why, and I understand they could call it up, but at this, at this time of night, I don't think too many, particularly school-age
No.
parents with kids having their showers or baths or getting ready for bed are gonna pull anything up. And so I think we should start off.
Yep.
Right off the bat, projecting it the next meeting, and Matt and I can talk to it.
I do have to apologize, Paul, because we were hoping to get into that and have you here today.
A lot of important stuff we talked about today.
No, that's cool. Go ahead, Caitlin.
I didn't know, did we just decide that we would go by based fully on design and not have because all the times you mentioned that we would have like a construction manager, we would have like a budget that we were going with. Was it that 4 million? What was the discussion, right? He was saying that like we would come in where we wanted to, but we don't really have a decided where we want to come in still, right on the amount. I know we're talking about the tax rate change and impact and how people would see it and how we could get awareness and all those things, but do we have I know we can't say an exact dollar amount, but like a tax rate change maximum we want to discuss?
Target cost.
Thank you for having your speech. I love it.
Something
like
because
that.
that's-
I feel like if we prepare for next meeting, we do a bill, so we bring up the drawing. Matt, in the meantime, maybe you can just check on the rates.
Yeah, it's a call of the bond bank.
Well,
And
I-
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, because I know that we typically do 20-year bonds, but between 2020 and 2023, Merrimack grew 8.8%, the highest in all the towns. So those kids are gonna keep growing, and then they're gonna need to be educated in more schools, and we're already like at our limits. So if our town doesn't typically take on 20-year bonds, like to take on 20-year bonds, multiple of them at a time, do we have to, or not have to, should we have conversation about 10-year bond? I don't know what that, obviously I would think it would cost significantly more, would be how much it would impact, but is that something that we should discuss since we're already growing? And I know this is about the SAU building, but we are trying to, make sure that our community is aware of all the different things, and like Anthony was saying, where everything adds up, right? It might be $53 or whatever kind of thing, but $53 plus $100 for this, plus $70 for this, plus this still adds up to something. So while we're keeping all that in mind, and the fact that we are growing exponentially in a short period of time, we want our new people to come and get jobs in our school district, right? So we want it to be in a good SAU building within a short period of time. So is that something we kind of have to discuss? Like the difference between, I don't know the difference between bonds.
Well, I can do any bond schedule you want. I think the major question is, what floor plan do you want to start with? Do you want to look at the original one that was presented before the $2 million reduction was hit and see if that is still viable and look at a cost of that? Or do you want to start somewhere in between?
I'd entertain a motion if somebody has one.
So I don't know. I didn't necessarily want to make a motion. I was just going to offer a thought that, if you have a couple of those that you could just plug in that evening, so we can see the differences between the two, and even
Floor
if we
plans?
have something,
Sure.
And if you had something for me.
I even went online. They're online if you know where to look. But yeah, it's true.
So that's all. I don't
Yeah.
want to make a motion on something like that, but I thought that would be beneficial, so we could look at the different things that were out
I
there.
think that would be very beneficial, because there's a lot of people that don't know what the difference were. Those two, we went from one value to one value like that, and how can you just cut that out? Where'd that go?
Where did those people go?
There were some significant changes to that building design, so I think it would be very worthwhile to have
Yeah,
those
to
two
compare.
designs up there, make people understand it. Yeah, you lost all of this concept that we had because of the value.
Go ahead, Larry.
So all I was going to say is, last year, we spent a lot of time talking about the design of that first building and why we felt that design was important. And then, like Kate just said, then it changed. I'd like to go back and have those conversations again, because we talked a little bit about them tonight, but like, you know, Bill was saying about the conference room. You know, the conference room in Merrimack, we don't have a lot of space, but it's really for teachers have to be recertified. There's something called professional development. There needs to be space for them to do it. And if we don't have that space, what happens is our teachers have to go out to another town, to another place, and it costs money. So the town, when we send a teacher to get professional development, it might cost $400 or $500 for them to take this, you know, workshop where so there's a cost savings that people don't know about that we spent a lot of time talking about in those conference rooms. So I want to make sure we get all those points back out.
Do you think that putting the two different designs up there will help shake that out? Is that?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
maybe we start with the old one and then we, you know, go to, you know, all right, this is what our original design was, that was at that time this committee's, and then go to, you know, the reason why was really, I think it was a nervous thing. We felt like from social media, from the misinformation out there, there was lots of reasons, and you know, it was, you know, like everyone said, it maybe wasn't the best decision, you know, just to get something passed, but it really wasn't the mission, it wasn't our vision, it wasn't what we decided. So, you know,
Tough timing.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask 2 quick questions about the professional development?
Yeah.
One, I noticed right over there, right next to the library, they have that building. I think it's called the Adult Learning Center. I'm just curious, like, does the school ever use that space?
That's the senior center.
I was gonna say, it's used
Oh,
by the senior experience center.
So it's not something that can be used or rented out, or,
people Finley and my age to go.
oh,
Yeah.
but people are, can like reserve it.
It's a
Oh,
town
okay.
property, you have to rent it.
Oh, it's a town property?
Yes, so if you
And it
wanted
can
to
be
have
rented?
like a
Okay.
party there, you could have a party there, but it's a senior citizens thing,
But it's,
so they
but
have
it goes to the town.
meetings.
But we've never used it. And then the other, I was just curious, like, I know we have, isn't there a theater and there's like have there,
In Wasserman Park, so
oh, I meant at the school. Isn't there like
There's a little
it's
theater.
called
It's
the
literally
it's
called
Is it
the
tiny?
Little Theater.
I've never
It's a-
been in it.
Yeah.
Is
It's
it
a
tiny?
little
Yeah.
theater.
Go do some research. Walk
It's
the properties.
small.
Check them out, because you have to know
Yes, I'll
what,
give
if
you
you
a
don't know the
tour,
existing
'cause
conditions,
that's-
you don't know
Well,
what's
Pete,
existing.
If you recall, I asked you if you'd be willing to talk through some of this stuff. You didn't want to.
No, I don't want to talk anything privately. I want to make sure that anything we discuss is out in the open. I don't want to go down that road, and I still say that right now. But if you want to see any property, I'll walk you, Pat can walk you around, Matt can walk you around. We can do a whole tour of anything you want to see. I've been in the town my whole life, so I know what I'm talking, the space that we're talking about. If you don't, you should go look.
And the gymnasiums, like we had several hundred people every time we have a deliberative session. Hundreds of people in the gymnasium. Is that not a place where we've ever
Well,
done any
one of
kind
the issues,
training?
it's interesting, Anthony, because we just had that discussion today.
When there was like 400 people.
The acoustics are terrible, whether it's in a gymnasium or a cafetorium. We were just having those discussions today because we had that 2-hour discussion of where were we gonna fit everybody for the professional development. We talked about the little theater and the fact that we couldn't have more than 2 schools there, even though we wanted all the elementary staff there, because it only housed 200. Now conventionally, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, a performing arts center, which I'll use that term in quotes for that, is generally built to accommodate half the population of a high school or whatever school you're building it in. So when that was built, Matt, you may know more than I do, I would estimate that probably there was 400 to 500 kids in that high school.
That was
at
before
the
my time here, that's for
Because
sure.
it is almost useless unless you're dealing with one school at a time. I don't even know if it'll fit the entire Merrimack High School staff.
No, staff.
But, good questions.
Yeah,
But we just talked about
cafeteria,
those issues today.
gymnasiums, and you say you think acoustics is the biggest problem with those?
I
think
I've,
size
I've,
for
I've
meeting
been
spaces?
there,
Size, he said.
Anthony, I've been in those spaces, in gymnasiums and in the cafetoriums, we call them, all-purpose rooms, on professional development sessions over the last couple of years. Between the sound bouncing off the hard surfaces, the floor, and you can hardly hear a damn thing in there. And so we just talked about the fact that it's impractical to have large audiences in either a gym or an all-purpose room to have professional development. You have to experience it.
I'd just like to note that from a corporate standpoint, like companies, they do invest in these common spaces because that's how work gets done, right? Like that's how people communicate. That's how the railroad gets laid, right? So if all the companies are dedicating these kind of community spaces and spending the money on them, I would think that it would be reasonable that we do that within our education system where we're doing good work, right? So I think there's a precedence out there for why we have dedicated community spaces.
And
that
not all
we
professional
don't need to
development
argue, right?
is discretionary. We have more and more, whether it's by state statute or federal statute, more and more mandated professional development that we have to conduct during the years. And so we're always looking for space and suitable spaces. So I'll be glad to go into any of those spaces with you if you want, but the acoustics are just absolutely terrible.
And Caitlin, to your point earlier, actually, when you and I went to school here, we were up here. Believe it or not, we're down here. We're going back up here. So if you think it's busy now, it's. Any other comments for today? So we discussed for next time, let's get real tax impact, and we can have some values for that based on the design, pricing, and options. And we're going to bring up both designs, put them up on the screen, compare them, review the needs of the original building, and then talk about if a reduction is able to be, in our opinion, viable. And then we're going to, we'll probably have some more questions for design-wise for Paul. I don't think you need to be at the next one because we probably won't be ready unless you want to sit in. There might be some value of you being here, but we could also not waste your time and get all our questions together. It's up to you. Okay. If you don't mind, we'd love to have you if we're going to be going over design and stuff just to see if it makes sense. Particularly if we're talking about cubicles and things. You may have some input as to feedback from other buildings you've built and designed, and that may be good or bad. Yeah, Lori.
I was just gonna say, so normally, because we have to go out to bid, I think we have to be careful who we bring, because normally we're gonna go out to bid, we have to get bids. So I just think we have to be careful, like how we do that, because we're gonna go out, it's a bidding process.
Yeah, I understand that, and Paul certainly doesn't need to be here, and he's on his own time. It's not like we're paying him to be here, but at the same time, I think there's value in getting that feedback while we're discussing it, and it's not like. Go ahead.
So architects are almost always hired qualification based, not bid. We won't bid on a project. It's just not worth it. Most architects don't. So usually you hire an architect based on their experience and their reputation and all that. And we're just advising you. We're never putting a price in on the project. We have nothing to do with the construction. So we're just an advisor, just a consultant to help you make the right decisions, get the
And you've
best
also
value.
made the right decisions for our town for years.
Yeah.
You've built other buildings
Yeah.
in our town that we use to this day and work well.
We've never had a project where we bid on a project and get hired that way. It's never happened.
Go ahead.
No, it just says, generally a request for proposals. It has a qualitative component to it, which is does this architect meet all the specifications? Are they capable of doing design of a similar size and scope? And then you look at, based on the selection, you look at a quantitative component. What is their price? And you either negotiate with them or decide they're too high, and then you go on to the next qualified architect. So the RFP process is more appropriate, I think, than just a straight bid for architectural design and engineering
And
services.
the other, whether you hire us or not,
Yeah.
whatever, it's irrelevant. But just so you know, the architect you select will affect the cost of the building more than anything else. You'll hire architect A, and they'll design you a building that will cost $1 million more than architect B. Just the way it works. They'll specify higher end systems, better fit, whatever, fancier finishes, whatever. It's just the nature of it. So just be aware of that. The choice of the architect, the difference in the fee of the architect is really small compared to the cost that they'll make or save you or cost you on the actual project.
Do you typically get hired up front or through the GC?
What's that?
Do you typically get hired through a general contractor or
No.
directly? You never get
No.
hired through a GC.
I mean, that's design build. We have done some small projects like that. A contractor come to us, say, hey, can you help us design this? And then we'll work with them. But 98% we get hired by the school district.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
the
with the
architectural
middle
cost-
school, we hired them directly.
Yeah.
The architectural cost used to be about 12%. Now, this was years ago, 12% of the anticipated construction cost. Is it still around that same percentage?
No.
Okay.
Architects wish it were 12%. It varies a lot. Like if it's a little messy renovation project, you know, $100,000 really complicated renovation project, it might be 12%. But if it's a huge school project, you know, $50 million school project, it might be 5%.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
sliding
everything's
scale
relative.
based on
Yeah.
the value of the project. But for something like this, probably like 8%, somewhere in that range, I would guess.
Any other action items for next week or next month? Excuse me? Those are the next steps, by the way, Laurie. That's what I was thinking on the next steps, was the tax impact, bringing the information, and then obviously discussing it. And in the meantime, if you guys want to put out any information about going to see the blue buildings, I mean, we should start that now.
Yep,
You
and I'll
mentioned-
bring that to the next school board meeting, that we could start setting up volunteers to open the buildings and do. I'll definitely bring this to the next school board meeting, that we could start opening up the buildings, you know, like have a Saturday a month where people could come and have a tour and get information. And if this committee, last year you guys did a great job, like, you know, on the questions, you know, or, you know, some of the information that you had, if we could just look at that next meeting, just to make sure that that's still viable information to give people when they come for the tour.
Okay.
Do we still have the video?
Yeah.
At least the rough?
Yeah, it's it's posted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right on the bottom, you go to the Merrimack School District page, scroll to the bottom, main page, historical information about the SAU.
It's all there.
You click it, you bring up everything. You bring up the designs, the videos, the PowerPoint, you get everything there.
What's a better title?
Well,
cares?
I would
I
love
know
to
what
see
it
it
is.
linked from this committee's page.
It is,
Oh,
as
it
well.
is
Didn't
now?
we put it on this page as well?
You know, I think that was during a period where summer vacations hit, and so I have to check to see if that was done, but if not, we can get it done
I
real
think the main
quick.
page is probably a lot easier to find, though.
Well, it just depends. It depends on, not everyone like starts on the main page and then tries to navigate from there. Like I have a bookmark that goes direct, for example, to like the committee page, right? Or like direct to the school board page. So I just click that link. And if I don't find what I'm looking for, I don't go like fish around on all the web pages to figure out where it's hidden.
I'd recommend you start at the front page, because there's a ton of good summary information there about everything going on in the town. That's great stuff. These guys do a great job with the website and keep it updated. I mean,
That gets to the fact that I know that that's one of the things they're trying to do is look at redoing the page, the whole
Yeah.
page,
It would be
and
good to put
communication and,
Link on that.
Yeah.
yeah, but we can.
Yeah.
and that's where we'll also put the tax impact, the real tax impact.
But the title,
details
historical information, people
We-
don't realize that that's about
Not yet.
the new, I mean, the title, new.
What?
It needs a better title, historical.
What, Matt? Can't do
perspective.
that?
Do you really wanna look at that?
Yeah, no, it's the tax, when I go through and I look at that page that has the historical information, it has the tax impact on it.
It's a mathematical equation, though.
Yeah, that is correct.
Sometimes that gets slipped past people. We want to just have a number there, so it's very
We
clear.
want to translate it.
Yeah, people calculate their own math. You know what I mean?
Or an example of here's the equation and here's what it means.
$500,000 house.
Step through the
Here's
math.
what it means
Well, no, I
to
mean,
you,
th-
taxpayers.
There's a lot of people
To
that
us.
don't.
We're all taxpayers
yeah.
here too.
I couldn't figure this
The
out
ma-
till last year, and Matt had to walk me through it twice.
I
you know.
did not.
That's just what it is. People don't pay attention to this stuff.
It can be confusing.
Yeah, when I go to historical information, when we had the $4.8 million, right on the main page, I know you can't see it because it's just on here, wherever the camera is, right?
Here,
It says tax impact per thousand, and it says $500,000 house. First year was $12, second year was
Oh, wow.
$47, $46,
didn't know that.
$45, $44.
So I can.
So it was all there.
That was a great post.
I can say with 100% certainty that most people don't know like how that equates to how it impacts them, because I've had conversations out in community. I'm part of this community, and I know these details, and if I explain these details to people, they go,
Yeah.
"Whoa, I didn't know any of that."
It's funny
You know,
because it
so
was on the voter's guide
it's not
too,
getting picked up,
and it
though,
was said at the
somehow.
deliberative session. You know, that was part of what the board stated when they made the presentation.
Presentation was a bit rushed.
It
'Cause
was
we got
a
the
bit
time.
rushed. It was like
Yeah.
3 minutes and done. I
Yeah,
didn't
which
really
is a
care for
bunch
that.
that's insane. It just bothered
Yeah,
me
that was,
so
but that was
immensely.
someone got up and voted.
A former, that's right,
They,
yeah.
they made a
Somebody's
motion,
word.
all.
Yeah, to
all
limit it to
discussions
3
have to be
minutes.
limited to 3 minutes, something like that, and it should not have included the presentation.
Moving on to approval of prior minutes. Oh, go ahead, what?
No, I didn't know if you wanted to go home or if you want to hang for the minutes. I was just trying to find a way out for you if you
Yeah.
wanted.
We have 5 minutes left. If you want to
So
stay,
you-
you can. If you don't, yeah. Approval of prior minutes?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the prior minutes
As
amended.
as amended.
as written.
Changed.
Do we have a second?
Can I second, even though I wasn't here?
Yes.
Yeah, you
Great.
read 'em.
I read them. I'll second that.
Do we, all those in favor of approving prior minutes as
Well,
listed?
is there any change?
For August.
Oh, right there.
I looked at-
Any change?
Any changes? Any discussion? Sorry. Told you, Gage, you didn't want this. You could have
I know
been
I
here.
didn't.
I don't want to do this. All right, approval of prior
That
minutes?
was when the, amended, that's what I should have said last time, 'cause then we have to go back.
Don't let him, he tried to get out of this whole thing. Don't let him,
Is he voting?
you gonna throw up or what?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay.
That's his abstain
Okay.
face.
I voted.
Yep, 1, 2, 3. Anthony, were you in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor? 1 abstain? Lori? School board.
Abstain. It's different.
All right, next meeting dates. Go ahead, Pat.
I was gonna say, we could meet a second time in September. This committee has met twice a month.
What are people's thoughts?
You have
Oh,
All I know is
For
my
who?
kids get
Nobody?
married October 5th.
now.
That's all I know.
Well, then we will meet October second, how's that?
Daughter's getting married that first week, so if we could just go into the second week in October, that would be better for us.
Do you wanna wait till
Sarah?
October 9th? Do you wanna meet another time this month?
Sarah's getting married?
Yeah.
What's the feeling here? Do we want to do it in 3 weeks or 6 weeks? Actually, I'm out that week, so 3 weeks or 6 weeks. Just
3 weeks is
feel free to
the
jump in.
25th of September, then there's the 9th or the 16th of October.
Doesn't matter to me.
I was gonna say, we have the, school board, not school board, we have the budget meeting, I believe, that, yeah, that Tuesday,
The
so,
budget meeting is on Tuesday.
yeah, that's what I meant, like, that same week, so I was just, it's up to you.
Oh, you guys have to lay. Yeah, no, I get you. Although that should be revised this year.
You said you're not here on the 18th, that's.
No, I'm good for the 9th, actually. I'm leaving right after that.
Oh, you're into October, so you're not gonna,
No, I can't do, the 9th is
No, I'm good for that.
next week, you mean?
October.
Oh,
October.
all right,
Let's not get aggressive now, Gage.
okay.
We switched to Wednesday because,
Yes.
Gage Perry wanted us to.
So you said the 2nd does not work for you?
Right.
Yeah, that would be difficult.
You mentioned the 5th. That's a Saturday. The 2nd's
yeah,
a
that's
Wednesday. I
when she
didn't-
get married, but that week before is gonna be chaos.
Okay.
She's getting married this
Yes.
Saturday, so we're gonna be
All right.
heading out.
So the 9th, does that work for everybody?
Yep.
October 9th, yep.
All right. Next meeting is October 9th. 7 p.m., same spot.
Didn't you have the 25th? Is that gone?
Well, the 25th of September is possible, but because there's a budget committee meeting.
Oh,
These
okay.
guys are going to be
All
out
right.
late
Okay,
that
no,
night.
And
That's
I
all right.
wouldn't be.
BudCon's going to have them there till what,
Gone.
11, 11:30 at
Gone.
night?
That's all right, gone. Easy.
Not happening.
Wednesday,
16
October
of the
9th,
sany questions?
7 p.m. Wednesday, October 9th, 7 p.m.
Good for you guys. All right. Do we have any motions?
Or your volume's up again.
Oh, is that my?
Oh, I don't
Oh,
know
you can
anybody.
do it, you're out.
I
You're
just
back.
can't do it.
I don't have to be
Motion
quiet.
to-
Adjourn,
I motion to adjourn?
There you go, Gage.
Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned at 8:43. Oh, all those in favor? Does anybody not want to? Meeting adjourned at 8:43.
We keep going.